What's up, my know-it-alls? Well, it is that time again. That means it's Wednesday morning, and we're doing one thing that's talking about The Mandalorian, specifically Season 3, Episode 7, Chapter 23, The Spies. Okay, so this is this episode takes a turn. It's you know what? Let's get into it. I think it's the best way to go. So the episode starts with us following Elias Kane, specifically through some backstreet areas, until all of a sudden you see what looks like remember those old, not Inquisitor droids, but the like drones they would send out, the ones like went on Hoth and whatnot. Well, one of those guys comes floating out of the smoke and lands, and then you see your very first shot of Moff Gideon. That's right. He's in a kind of that hologram, talky version of himself, and so he in essence finds out everything that she has to report. Specifically, that there's growing, basically the Mandalore. The Mandalorians are looking to take Mandalore back, and so now you see we join Moff Gideon on his ship as he leaves that conversation and heads over to a different conversation with a shadow council. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So it's these former Imperial officers who are currently still holding their small areas of space. And their little fiefdoms, if you will. And they mention several things. There are several Easter eggs that get dropped here. The first is what they call, it's not Project Phoenix. That's that's something entirely different. That's a different franchise. Sorry about that. No, it's like Project Necromancer or something, which I believe is, I'm assuming has something to do with Palpatine, or what would be the cloning of Palpatine. And so there's a lot of question about that as well in this meeting. And Moff Gideon's basically like, look, you guys, look, that's your thing. That's whatever. I know what I need to do. And he essentially is like, and they mention Thrawn. So for those of you playing at home, Thrawn is a huge callback. If you caught the Ahsoka trailer, which I did, by the way, it's a massive throwback, and specifically to a series of books from the original canon, which were called Heir to the Empire. In the Ahsoka trailer, they give you that phrasing, which is pretty cool. But total geek moment there. But so what happens is, I think you even get a callback to, or not callback, but they mention a Commandant Hux. For those of you, again, playing at home, keeping track of with your Star Wars bingo, the main dude who was helping Snoke from the First Order, his name was Hux also. It's one of those things where you're like, okay, so they're, again, like last week, you're starting to mix that pot that eventually is going to take us to the First Order. Well, eventually we're going to be dumped at the front porch of the First Order. Gideon has really he's steering the Shadow Council to support him and his conquest of Mandalore, because it's kind of still been a thing. Because apparently as he's walking toward this meeting, you saw these force field things, and in between the force field things were some very special looking stormtroopers, either stormtroopers or stormtrooper armor. I'm guessing they were actually the stormtroopers in their armor, because they're stormtroopers who are wearing Beskar armor. Okay, so now remember, the New Republic thinks still from last week that Mandalorians rescued Moff Gideon. We know that's not the case. It's that Gideon stole the Beskar and has been ultimately building his own mini army. Even the dark troopers were all in Beskar armor as well. Remember the robot ones? So I'm telling you, well, let's keep going. So that's when we cut to our first shot of Navarro as Grief Karg is in his office, and all of a sudden from above you see what looks like this Imperial ship arrive. But is it? As they back up and literally his droid is all worried, he's like, no, take a look at the markings. It's a massive mythosaur symbol. It's the Mandalorians, of course. It's the privateers. And so they've arrived and brought their little mini fleet there, and they park. And while they're there, Grief Karg brings them some stuff, as well as bringing Mando another gift. The gift is IG-11, who's now IG-12. and is essentially an exosuit for Grogu. Dude, it's the coolest thing ever. Actually, I gotta admit, that's pretty awesome. As he's in the thing, and here, come here, buddy. We're gonna take good care of you. As he's in the thing, and he literally climbs up into the little suit, and he starts driving the thing, and at one point, Mando's like, yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. Because it has a yes button and a no button, and then it's just doing its thing. So he's just autonomously walking around saying yes, yes, or no, no, depending. And it's like he's able to articulate. And Mando's like, okay, I get it. Okay, fine. This is my first, so real quick sidebar. This is my first thought when it comes to this. I have the feeling that this could very well be the thing that leads us to eventually Grogu having his version of Mandalorian armor. A Mandalorian suit of some kind. It's a thought, right? When they arrive, it's literally the two things you see: the new Mandalorians, the Death Watch Mandalorians versus the Night Owl or regular Mandalorians who are actual Mandalorians from people born on Mandalore. And that's when the armorer welcomes them as fellow Mandalorians, thus kind of putting a stop to all that. Obviously, Axe Woves and Paz Vizsla are going to sit here and butt heads every now and again because they're both alpha males. That's what you do. And it's pretty, but it's fun. It's fun to watch. That night, the Mandalorians gather together, and Bo-Katan is like, listen, we have to do this thing. And she lays out for them their entire mission, explaining in detail that they need to, what they're going to have to do. And she says, we're going to need to get a group. We're going to take ships. We're going to go here. We're going to do this thing, and we're going to go back. And then from there, we're going to get a group together. So she needs volunteers because the main fleet's going to stay in orbit of Mandalore. And then they're going to bring an exploratory group down to the planet to scout and make sure. Because what they want to do is they want to secure the forge. And once they secure the forge, they're going to start building a perimeter and basically retake in stages from there. This is also the very first time there's this massive of a unified group of Mandalorians, a concentrated group of Mandalorians, if you will. So they do all this, they get down, they get to the ship, and when they arrive on the planet, they're greeted by Mandalorians. Specifically, these are people who are very familiar. They recognize her voice, and they immediately refer to her as the Lady Bo-Katan. And you get this interesting look at these guys are rough. They're rough looking, but they still are like, we're here to serve the royal house, the princess, and okay, because she's still a princess. One might argue, Bo-Katan is a Disney princess. So anyways, it's really interesting to find out, and you get to hear more about the fight, what happened on the night of the purge. You get to hear they all have dinner together. And you find out from Bo-Katan that at the end, her and Moff Gideon had come to they had reached out to her in the final days of the bombings and wanting to do a ceasefire in exchange for the Darksaber. So he turns over the Darksaber, and the purge, it happens anyway. And the Night of 1,000 Tears and all the other stuff, it's a rough story, especially when you find out that Bo-Katan was betrayed while trying to surrender, which is a very un-Mandalorian thing to do. And so, but everyone realizes she was doing the best she could to save and protect her people. And that's that's the thing that mattered the most. While they are headed back, well, they're headed, because they can go right now, they're headed to the forge. They're in the thing. It's going to be a bit of a travel. And Mando, it comes over to, I keep calling him Mando like everybody else says, Djarin. Djarin comes out, and he essentially she's like, it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult, I don't know if I'm going to bring them together, there's going to be all these problems. And he says to her, well, you can do this, and he basically encourages her, but at the same time, he kind of swears fealty to her. It isn't full-blown fealty, but what I mean is, he's very like, that's why I serve you, and this and that. It's not the creed, but it feels very in that vein, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm interested to see sort of where they continue to take this story. So then as they're exploring, they find essentially because they go further into exploring underground. As they go to explore, this massive creature comes out of nowhere. It's huge. It's monsters bursts out of the ground. And they scatter, and they've got to run and escape, and it's very bad. So you see several of them on fire, so probably several of them died. And ultimately, where they go and escape to, they find themselves being attacked. They're in a hangar with Imperial-looking TIE fighters hanging in there and whatnot, and some other things, and they suddenly get attacked by these new and improved Dark Troopers in Beskar armor. And that's when you fully begin to understand the complexity of what's going on. As they get cornered, who shows up in this black... What pretentious... It's black armor. It's him. It's Moff Gideon. But his helmet has these little crown-like things. And I'm like, dude, what are you, a child? Anyway, I want a crown for my head. And you're like, get out of here, dude. You're an idiot. But yeah, so... yeah, it's rough, man. This is a very OK Corral moment. And by that, I just mean, if this was a Western, this is most definitely one of those moments where you're like, oh, I mean, the bad guys are winning. Like, this is not good. So again, they're changing the motif, and I'm down. And I think you needed to move the story along a little sooner. I would have liked to have seen something along these lines a little earlier, but at the same time, I'm happy it finally happened where it happened. So, He wants the Darksaber. He wants her unequivocal surrender, and he's talking to her as if she's still the person who made the deal with him. I mean Moff Gideon, and of course Bo-Katan. And instead, Bo-Katan takes the Darksaber and she cuts a hole in the back while everyone else is shooting. And they open the blast doors, and Paz Vizsla's the only one who's there, and he's using his gun and he's shooting his big giant Gatling gun thing, and he's just spraying fools. And everyone's rushing out, and you get to the very end, and she's like, we gotta go. And he goes, just go. And he closes the blast doors and proceeds to continue shooting. And he is doing an amazing job. The gun in his hand is overheating from how much he won't stop shooting it. And eventually the gun begins to, it jams up, and he takes the gun itself and throws it at a guy, and there's two final guys, and he slams them over the ledge of this thing, and he's defeated everybody. And then the Imperial Guard show up. 3 of the Imperial Guard show up, and he's no match. And it's rough. It's very rough. But yeah, so it's the whole situation is. I tell you what, man, it's a rough scenario. But yeah, so they're on the run, trying to defend. The fleet's up above. Everything looks very bad right now, which is what you expect from your getting close to the end episode. But yeah, so there you go. Now you know. And if knowing's half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. So what's the know-it-all index for this episode of Star Wars: The Mandalorian? I'm gonna go with I think this was an okay episode. I'm glad things are happening finally. So I'm gonna say, realistically, I'll give this an 8.5. It's not bad. It's a good episode. And so, yeah, well, comment below. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you thought about the episode. Also, really excited for some new things coming around soon. I will be telling you guys about very soon. So be on the lookout for those announcements. Don't forget to follow us on all the social medias and all the good things out there at A Real Know-It-All. So I'll talk to you guys all soon. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all.